أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The Friday sermon delivered by Hazrat Khalifatullah Munir Azim Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Azil Aziz of Mauritius, Imam Jamaatul Sahih al-Islam International, on 3rd March 2023, 10th Shaban 1444 Hijrah. After greeting all Muslims and all his disciples around the world with the salam, the salutation of peace in Islam, the Khalifatullah Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Azil Aziz read the Tashahhud, Ta'awuz and the Surah Al-Fatiha, and he then focused his sermon on humanity in danger, showing mercy, part 2. By the grace of Allah, I continue to expound today on the subject matter of my sermon on the recent calamities which have struck Turkey and Syria. Like you have read and seen in the news, Monday 6 February 2023 was a dreadful day not only for those two countries but for the whole world. One of the deadliest disasters of the world hit the southeastern region of Turkey and northern Syria. The earthquakes in Kahramanmaraş are not only the largest earthquakes ever experienced in recent years in Turkey, but also the largest earthquakes in the world in the last century or more in residential areas. The quakes flattened buildings of all kinds and killed thousands of people across southern Turkey and northern Syria, like I mentioned last week. The magnitude 7.7 and 7.6 earthquakes were centered in the Kahramanmaraş. The earthquakes affected an area of approximately 110,000 square kilometers, about 42,471 square miles. This is equal to or greater than the area of many countries in Europe. The earthquakes also caused high death tolls and destruction in Syria. Lebanon felt the strong tremors that struck Turkey in the space of fewer than 10 hours. Aerial footage from over the earthquake zone in Turkey revealed entire neighborhoods of high-rises reduced to twisted metal, pulverized concrete and exposed wires. This earthquake is the third largest to occur since the 1668 Great Anatolia earthquake and the 1939 Erzincan earthquake in the last 2000 years in Anatolia. After the 1999 Marmara earthquake, the Turkish government took crucial measures and made critical decisions regarding building material supplies, since Turkey is located in an earthquake zone. Under Turkish regulations updated in 2018, high-quality concrete has to be reinforced with ribbed steel bars. Vertical columns and horizontal beams have to be able to absorb the impact of tremors. Urban planners have complained that rules have not been observed in earthquake zones. Due to the cost of urban transformation, people often avoid rebuilding their homes to be safer. However, this tragic event
has demonstrated that the effort and cost required to construct safe buildings is worth is to save lives. Regarding these issues, landowners and construction companies must be sensitive to the dangers, and the state should be responsive. Had all the regulations been followed, the columns would have survived intact and the damage would have been confined to the beams. The Turkish Justice Minister has said anyone found to have been negligent or at fault will be brought to justice. International community has been sensitive to this indescribable distress caused by one of the biggest earthquake disasters Turkey and Syria have ever faced. In Turkey, which has suffered the brunt of the deaths from the tremor, local rescuers working in earthquake-ravaged towns and cities have been joined by volunteers from around the world, including Mauritius, like I stated last week, and bolstered by international aid shipments. But in Syria, where the United Nations serves as a lifeline for 4.1 million people in the northwest, only 2 of its 8 convoys have made it through the sole border crossing with Turkey since the tremor occurred, one of which was organized before the disaster. The Turkish authorities and NGOs have been very swift to mobilize resources in order to come to the rescue of the victims. They have also appealed to international community for help. The Disaster and Emergency Management Authority AFAD and the Turkish Red Crescent Kizilay are accepting donations also for relief work for victims of the earthquake in Turkey. As for the European Union, it was swift to dispatch rescue teams to Turkey. The European President Ursula von der Leyen announced that the European Union is planning to host a donor conference in March in Brussels in coordination with Turkish authorities to mobilize funds from the international community in support for the people of both countries. The US government has pledged more than $80 million in urgent life-saving relief for earthquake victims in Turkey and Syria. The tragedy has generated a sense of solidarity among the Muslims worldwide in favor of the victims. From Islamabad to Kuala Lumpur and from Senegal to Azerbaijan, they are all mobilized to extend a helping hand to Turkish and Syrian peoples. In Mauritius too, people have been spontaneous to extend their help. Several Arab countries have extended vital support with rescue teams and relief supplies to help in earthquake relief operations in Turkey and Syria. Arab nations rushed to raise funds and sent aid to Turkey. United Arab Emirates has set up a field hospital in the southern Gaziantep province. The United Arab Emirates has sent many planes, some to Turkey and some to Syria, with the required aid in hundreds of tons, several search and rescue teams, and a fully equipped mobile field hospital. On President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan's directives, special prayers were held in mosques on Jumu'ah for the victims of the devastating quakes. Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani donated more than $12 million to earthquake survivors in Turkey and Syria. Al Thani donated the money to a campaign organized by a Qatari television channel. Around $19 million has been raised as part of the campaign. Saudi planes arrived in the southern Turkish city of Adana with rescue teams ambulances, volunteers, and more than 200 tons of relief and medical supplies. More than 550,000 people have donated in Saudi Arabia for the quake victims, generating more than 250 million riyals. The Kuwaiti cabinet has pledged $30 million for relief efforts in Turkey and Syria. In Bahrain, special prayers were held in the country's mosques for earthquake victims during Jumu'ah. A campaign for donations was also launched in Bahrain. Rescue teams and relief suppliers from Oman have already reached Adana and have started working in the Hatay province. The Iraqi government has also sent planes with relief items and medical supplies for earthquake victims in Turkey and Syria. A 73-member Palestinian team reached Turkey and Syria to help out in the ongoing quake relief efforts. The Palestinian government has also launched a relief drive with the Religious Endowments Ministry, starting off the collection by donating $100,000. In Libya, Moulay Jadidi, head of the Tariq Social Council, called on people to donate and extend assistance to quake victims in Turkey and Syria. The Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Ghazouani directed the government to organize urgent support for Turkey and Syria. In Sudan, the Sudanese army has sent a plane to Turkey with rescue teams and relief items. Jordan, Lebanon, Tunisia, and Egypt have also announced sending humanitarian aid for earthquake victims in Turkey and Syria. The world is expressing solidarity with Turkey after the powerful earthquakes. Government actors, NGOs, activists, and individuals have come together to help those in need. This is how solidarity can overcome adversity at difficult times, inshallah. Beyond our human obligation to the victims of the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, are there lessons to be learned, including in our local context? Same question with regard to the victims, for example, of the sad and regrettable accident that occurred when the Hindu pilgrims were returning from Grand Basin. Is it earthquakes or electric shocks that kill? Or should we also see gross negligence on the part of men? Even now, as international aid seeks to reach the affected areas in Turkey and Syria, what are the obstacles that still risk causing thousands more deaths from disease, hunger, and cold? What should we do here as elsewhere to be less vulnerable and more resilient to disasters, natural or otherwise? What should we do here as elsewhere to be less vulnerable and more resilient to disasters, natural or otherwise? We do not imagine the Turkish and Syrian victims or others for that matter to be evil people. No one prospers in age or diminishes in age unless it is recorded in a book. However, only God knows when someone will taste death. We talk about a miracle when a woman comes out of the debris after a week, alive, or a building collapses on a baby, but the baby survives. It is not difficult for God in a split second to destroy us all, but we do not know what fate is. That is what will become of us, and this ignorance is our freedom. So, if our trust is in God, we must act with conscience, intelligence, and responsibility. Passivity, laziness, mediocrity, and fatalism are contrary to our testimony of faith in God.
We have known for a long time which places are most exposed to a probable earthquake. Moreover, in 1999, the same territory was already shaken by an earthquake of magnitude 7.6, causing more than 17,000 victims. Of course, there was then the establishment of a centralized civil defense body to deal with the disasters in Turkey, but that did not prevent the construction of giant buildings without any seismic standards. Many point to the over-concentration of powers in Turkey, which does not allow good governance at the level of local authorities. Basic rules regarding construction and infrastructure should not only be promulgated but also enforced on the ground. Japan and California, for example, are ahead in this regard, both in the techniques that have been developed and in the involvement of the population in the awareness raising and preparedness processes. In most cases, it is not earthquakes or other natural phenomena that kill, but it is the buildings and infrastructures that men themselves have built. And when it is countries in a situation of conflict that are affected, as in northeastern Syria, there is no need to ask the question whether the seismic standards are enforced and are respected there, because we all already know the answer that is no. This same region has, on the other hand, an extraordinary humanitarian intervention force, the Syrian Civil Defense or the White Helmets. Originally in 2011, there were groups of men and women who formed spontaneously to make themselves useful to a population deprived of public services in areas lost to the Al-Assad regime, therefore suffering the bombardments of the latter with the support of the Russian Air Force. Today, the White Helmets are seasoned non-political organization, ready to intervene, but they do not have the necessary support. For example, the United Nations continues to prioritize channeling its aid through the Al-Assad regime. Not only do victims in northeast Syria risk never receiving timely relief, but it could be diverted elsewhere. The urgency of preparing the empowering those on the ground locally in advance so that they can respond quickly is also evident from what happened in Germany with the floods in 2021 and in France and Spain with forest fires in 2020, and especially with the recent floods in Pakistan directly linked to climate change. The personal investment of volunteers and local professionals, whether firefighters, medical services, or humanitarian relief workers, men and women, is not a luxury but a necessity. They must have access to everything they need without delay in order to quickly reach the populations they know better than anyone. Otherwise, donations and other acts of solidarity, while essential, will not be of much use in time. Who is not heartbroken seeing a survivor crying, holding the hand of his lifeless little girl who lies under the ruins of buildings, and the father who cannot part away from her? Otherwise, there is the image of this mother who is inconsolable because she lost her son who left for a pilgrimage, but who will not come back. To God we all truly belong, and to Him we will certainly return. We must help those in need as much as possible, and above all do what is within our means so that buildings and infrastructures and everything built by men do not become sources of public danger. We must also act so that access to aid following disasters is not in itself a human calamity. Concretely, what to do on our island and also in Rodriguez Agaliga, Saint Brandon and the Chagos, while waiting for the return of its inhabitants. The accidents and incidents we witness, such as the one involving pilgrims to Grand Basin, should wake us up. There are three priorities, in short. First, build by always taking into account the limits that nature imposes on us, whether it is the risk of natural disasters or the impacts of climate change such as torrential rains. Sometimes the limits are human. They should not be ignored either. Only that is mankind's love for the power, the glory, and the possessions of this world, as well as for its pleasures, its appearances, and its futilities, seem limitless. Only that is mankind's love for the power, the glory, and the possessions of this world, as well as for its pleasures, its appearances, and its futilities, seem limitless. Second, train volunteers and professionals adequately and equip them, especially those who have access to the field, so that they are the first to intervene without delay. Finally, awareness, decision making, and leadership are critical in crisis management. We must reinvent our local communities so that they are able to act correctly without eternally waiting for orders from the top of hyper-centralized hierarchy. A few years ago, in the budget speech at the level of our island, an economy of life was announced. This is what we need today, more than economic or even sustainable development. There is an urgent need for true sustainability in everything we want to build. There is an urgent need for true sustainability in everything we want to build. Trust in God is essential because it is not only God who has a responsibility towards His creation, but we also have the duty to put everything in order and help our fellow human beings and our environment. And in the end, we have to regulate ourselves so that we are able to fulfill all the divine commandments. We have to regulate ourselves so that we are able to fulfill all the divine commandments and to help our neighbors without ulterior motives and without any thirst for power. It is a selfless sacrifice that God asks of us. Insha'Allah, may Allah help us to accomplish what He expects of us with confidence in Him and in our own ability to change the world with our efforts, our prayers, and a pure heart, Insha'Allah.